It's been remarkable that we now have an acceptable discourse that says that it's okay for the government to shoot somebody, and then the machinery of the government prove
It's okay.
that it's okay, and prove that it's her fault, and try to discredit her. What we're gonna chat a little bit about today is the idea of logic. Welcome to Masters of Influence. Hey, Joe, how's it going?
It's going crazy. I
Crazy,
wish I could
crazy good.
crazy dystopian maybe.
Yeah, it definitely has been an interesting couple of weeks. And what we're gonna chat a little bit about today is the idea of logic. I think what's been really interesting, the good shooting in Minneapolis, and that's the shooting of Nicole Good, not the shooting that's good.
Yes.
To me, has been the conversation that's been remarkable that we now have an acceptable discourse that says that it's okay for the government to shoot somebody, and then the machinery of the government prove
It's okay.
that it's okay, right? And prove that it's her fault, and try to discredit her. And I think I told you I was watching the Closer the other day, and a
Mm.
TV show made up lots of problems. I get that, but one of the things that they keep focusing on is if somebody shoots somebody, everything you have to go through to prove that it's a legal shooting, and the burden is on the police officer and all this stuff. And that was sort of the expectation. That's the way that we understood the world, right? And now something has shifted in that discourse, and I've been thinking, how do we talk about that? Because we don't want to necessarily have this be a purely political conversation. We really want to talk about the elements of power and how to think critically about things. And I'm thinking about, how are we going to talk about this? How am I going to write something for this? And then you, Joe, did something.
What did I do?
Exactly. So what you did was you posted a video in our business community. So can you just explain what happens in the video?
In the video they have a 6-year-old and they give him a rule, and the rule is that if you hit a glass with a feather, the glass breaks. And then they're having a conversation with him and they go, "Well, what happens if you hit a glass with a feather?" He goes, "Nothing." And they go, "Well, why not?" And he goes, "Because it's a feather." But the rule is that the guy, he goes, "Nothing, because
And all they
it's
did was they
soft."
say that, and that's it, right? So this,
Yeah.
and then they gave the example of the 13-year-old, and what happens with the 13-year-old.
With this 13-year-old, they give the 13-year-old the rule. And then when they ask the 13-year-old what happens when you hit a glass with a feather, she says, "Well, the glass breaks." And they go, "Well, why?" And they go, "Well, because that's the rule."
Good. So
And then that's where the video ends.
so
Comes to interrupt that.
you had a thought about that as it pertains to our clients, some of the work that we do together. So what was your thinking?
It was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was or 2 o'clock, and I was laying in bed, and I saw the video, and my initial thought, or my whole thought, and my only thought was, I see this happen all the time with people following the rules, right? They follow the rules even if the rules don't make sense anymore.
Right.
They follow the rules even if the rules don't logically compute, because there is a rule in place. I'm going to follow this rule, even if it takes me straight off the cliff. And so I wrote a little thing about that and how people follow SOPs sometimes, even to their detriment.
Good.
So that was my thought. That was
Problem that some of our clients face is that they write a standard operating procedure, and then they follow that standard operating procedure, even though it doesn't make sense.
yeah. Or
Okay.
even if the conditions change.
So do you know what the point of it was? Did you look
Yeah.
into? Okay.
I
So the
I
point
didn't
of
look
the
at it. I just looked
exercise
at
is
that
to
all the people.
so the point
Yeah.
of the exercise was to demonstrate a higher level of cognitive ability in the 13-year-old. There's something that happens, right, where we're now able to think of things in more abstract terms, where we don't have to just say, uh, well, a feather's soft, so it's not going to break a glass. We can actually use the logic of something and apply that logic to a situation without it the thing that we understand to be true. Okay. The 6-year-old is relying on common sense, interpreting everything through the filter of what I know, what I understand. And the 13-year-old is applying logic. Now, the problem with that is that as human beings, we're sort of inherently biased, and we're programmed to overemphasize the things that we see and we know, and we believe that those things are true. So the problem with common sense is that we don't know everything, and we haven't agreed what common is. So here's the challenge. What would make, when would it make sense to follow the rule? Feather hits the glass and the glass breaks.
It would make sense. Well, I would follow that rule in a professional environment. If that's what it says in the rule book, that you have to follow this rule, and then you
But
follow the rule.
under
And
what circumstances would the common sense suggest that that's the right thing to do? That would align with the common sense?
I don't know. I don't know under what
All right, so let's
circumstances.
imagine you're programming a video game.
Yeah.
And it's a magical feather.
Oh, well, yeah. Under that
Okay,
circumstance,
under that
well,
circumstance, it makes sense, right? So the rule
makes
has
sense.
to
Makes
be,
perfect sense.
so the
Yeah.
rule that you're giving the person who's programming it, even though they may say, but feathers don't break glass. You're like, no, no. In this game, the rule is the feather hits the glass and
Yeah.
the glass breaks.
There you go.
There's another rule. Another rule. Let's say that the feather is made of lead. It's really heavy and it's sharp. And you are curating a museum where you have this really light glass. And you're like, look, guys, here's the rule. Feather
Hey,
hits
the
the
feather hit
glass,
the glass.
glass breaks.
Yeah.
So do not let the feather hit the
Hit the glass.
glass. We need people to follow instructions when we give them standard operating procedures. I think it's the problem is they need to follow those instructions whether they like it or not, whether they want to or not, whether they think it makes sense or not. I don't care. If I tell you to and you know, we work with IT companies, if the SOP says clear the cache, I don't want you thinking about whether that makes sense. You just do it. When you're flying an airplane, I don't want you thinking about, you as the pilot, to be thinking about, well, does this rule of air traffic control make sense? No, that's
No.
not the time to think about that. You just follow the rule. If you're running a nuclear facility and you have to shut down the nuclear reactor, I want you to follow every step of the procedure. You don't get to say, oh, well, I don't think
Oh,
step
that's what
and
the work.
I'm not going to do step 3. No, no, there's 6,000 steps, 1 through 6,000, and you start with 1, then you do 2, then you do 3, and you go straight through. I'm getting to, we're going to get back to Minneapolis, but I think it's important to go through this, right? Because then there's a time when you shouldn't follow the rules. Because following the rules is just following the rules. It is doing what we're instructed to do. It is following the rules and believing things based on the rules that are given. And there is so much out there that is
Yes.
trying to set our understanding of the world and get us to follow rules. We have rules, we have legal rules, we have religious rules. The whole time, everybody is telling us what to believe, how to act, and how to follow certain rules. But when do you not want to follow the rule? When would you want somebody let's take the example of the pilot, or let's take the example of the nuclear reactor.
Or take the example of the pilot, because I like the example of the pilot.
Well,
right?
either
You
one of
take the
those, in the
example-
pilot or nuclear reactor, when should the rule not be followed? Or when should the rule be questioned?
the rule should be questioned, and particularly in the case of the pilot, when it's doing the thing that the rule says is going to kill everybody. And the perfect example of that with a pilot is Sully. right? The rule said turn back and go to the airport. That's what the rule said. That's what and everything else. And they tried to freaking pin it on him that because he landed the thing in the river, and he was like, in that moment, he had to question the rule. The rule, it was like, we're turning back. Like, no, we're not.
Well, so
Because
I
we,
would
right?
actually I would actually argue that and say, no. That because there were lots of rules about how to ditch the plane in the river, and in
Yeah.
fact, if you listen to interviews with him talking about the experience, he says the reason that everybody survived is because he had practiced that maneuver in simulators many
Over and
times,
over and over
and he
again.
knew
Yeah.
exactly what to do. He knew what the rules were for ditching the plane in the water. So, yeah, so the question was, would he make it back to the airport or not? But he's still following the rules.
Yeah, but that's
And
true.
there are very few I can't think of any circumstances where a pilot should not follow the rules. There's circumstances where you have to make a judgment call, but in general, you're going to follow the rules. And I think that's the same thing with the nuclear operator. The nuclear operator is going to follow the rules. However, there's still a situation in which you don't follow the rules, or you at least apply critical thinking to the rules. Any guesses? I'm really putting you on the spot. The advantage
Yeah,
that
but
I have is I thought this through, and the disadvantage that you have is I'm just putting you on the spot.
but that's okay. I like, because it's important for us to be able to think about these things. And I think that it's important for everybody out there that's
Well,
listening on the spot too. They need to be on the spot the same way I'm on the spot so that they're thinking about it. Because if you can't this out in your own head, then you're stuck. You're stuck. I'm thinking, well, it harms somebody or it harms me, or it like what are the circumstances inside of which, or that,
see, but I think even when there's a harm involved, and you
yeah.
actually still want people to follow the rules.
Oh
If
yeah.
there's a
Yeah, yeah,
situation where
yeah.
I could come up with a scenario that says, well, actually, if the rule is that he has to bring the plane back to the to 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 the airport regardless,
Hmm.
then he should probably do that. Even if it means killing everybody that's on the plane, because maybe what he's doing is endangering an entire city. I don't know. We're making up situations, but it shouldn't be in the moment that you're thinking, well, what am I going to do? Because you want to take that thinking out of the pressure of the moment, out of the emotional situation. And I think your example of the plane going into the Hudson is a perfect one, because if you listen to the interviews, he even says it's just muscle memory. I did the analysis because I'd known how to do it, and then I landed the plane exactly as I'd been taught. No thinking, no emotion involved. There is a time, though, for critical thinking. And that time is not at the moment of executing the SOP or the
Yeah.
procedure.
It's
It's at the
postmortem.
time of
Yeah.
designing it. So
Yeah.
when you're
Designing it or
actually
postmortem when it didn't work.
yeah, when you're looking at it, you say, well, did this work or did this not work? Right. So the nuclear
Yeah.
reactor didn't shut down properly. Well, maybe we should go back and look at why. The plane didn't make it all the way back to the airport and crashed. Well, maybe we should look at why. Or if you're designing a new plane, or if you're designing a new kind of nuclear reactor, there are lots of points where you want to apply critical thinking to the process. You just don't want the critical thinking to be at the moment of making crucial decisions, because we're probably not going to make good decisions at that point, and we're going to
Mhm.
fall back on 6-year-old logic of what feels right, of what seems right, of what common sense tells me to do, rather than the training. The whole point of the training is so that you don't think about it at the time of executing. And then you can go back and look at, well, was this the right thing or the wrong thing later?
Yeah.
But in the moment, you don't want to have that type of debate. But when you're designing systems, and when you're trying to assess whether something works or not, then you have to apply that critical thinking. And you have to apply is something logical or not? Does it make sense or not? And so you want to look at a rule at some point and say, does this rule make sense? Is this rule serving me? maybe this rule doesn't serve me anymore. So if nobody's ever looking at standard procedures, if nobody's ever looking at how things work and asking the question, does this rule serve? Then you're going to end up with a bunch of rules that make no sense, SOPs that make no sense, and ways of working and thinking and doing things that make no sense. Because if you never apply critical thinking, you're never going to improve things. The point that I wanted to make about the 13 and the 6-year-old is that we're both right. There is a time when you want to follow the rules, and then there's a time when you want to challenge the rules. So now I want to bring it back to Minneapolis. And what's interesting about Minneapolis is all of the conversations that are being had around this, and people latch on to, well, this is what somebody said, or this is what somebody said. You'll see an argument being made on certain news channels, and then people grab onto that and they just repeat that argument without any questioning of whether that's right or wrong. They're just following the rule. And you made this point the other day when we were talking about politics. They're just following the rule. The rule says, well, if this outlet said that this is the way to talk about things, then I'm going to talk about things that way. So here's the question. When we are consuming social media or participating in social media, when we are listening to the news, when we are participating in social discourse, who has the obligation to, or who should follow the rules?
The person that should follow the rules is the person that's trying to influence people, the person that is trying to set the narrative, the person that is trying to make it go a particular
Go
way.
in a certain way. And if you've ever
Yeah.
been through media training, because I've had to go through media training, they will teach you how to stick to your talking points. They will teach you how to say the things that you need to say, how to avoid questions, how to answer questions with your talking points rather than the actual answer that the interviewer might want. Because
Yeah.
when you are trying to influence, when you are trying to control, when you are trying to exert power, then you have to have everybody consistent. Then the question is, who has the obligation then to break or challenge the rules?
Well, it's the people that don't want to get influenced. If I'm playing the game, I have to follow rules. But if I'm out in the world now and you're telling me something that I blatantly know is not true, it's my obligation to do the digging, to do the figuring out, to deny that which you are like. If you're saying if I drop this glass, it's gonna float.
So here's I think the obligation to break the rules, or at least question the rules, or question what's being said, is anybody who doesn't want to be influenced, which is a beautiful way to put it, right? Anybody who doesn't want to be controlled by others, and anybody who is trying to participate in a political conversation. Because I think that we have an obligation to look at what we're doing, what we're listening to, what's being said, and question it with some sort of logic and thinking, rather than just blindly go with, well, this is my party affiliation, so I am going to stick to whatever the party line is. When we do that, that's when we fall into this cult-like thinking. That's when we fall into just doing things because somebody else has determined that that's the way we should think, or we should act, or we should do things.
And
If we go back to Minneapolis again, the rule of you're not allowed to protest, or you're not allowed to voice your opinions that seems to be espoused is, for me, pretty un-American. It's not the way that we do things. So I think we have an obligation to think and challenge some of these rules,
absolutely.
because we are in the design phase.
Absolutely.
And if you're not designing, if you're not thinking about design, and you're just stuck the rules, you're not taking responsibility for participating in a fruitful way in the discourse.
There's that, and then there's somebody's applying a very meticulous, well thought through plan to be able to usurp the rules. This particular case, the rule of law is under assault.
Okay.
In this particular case, with this particular regime, the rule of law is under assault. And as citizens, it is incumbent on us to go out, protest, and challenge the assault on the rule
Yeah,
of
but I
law.
wanna bring it back to the thinking exercise, right? Because it's not the rule of law that we're really talking about. It's the interpretation of what people say about what's going on. Because one thing you're saying, "Oh, the rule of law is under assault." My point is that somebody hearing that should apply critical thinking to your statement. And
Yes.
they should say, well, what is the evidence for and what is the evidence against?
Yes.
And can you make an argument for and can you make an argument against? You should
Again.
be able to argue both sides. You should be able to understand multiple sides to any argument. But the crucial thing is that when statements like that are being made, that we don't just follow the rule of, oh, I like Joe or I like Jeff. I mean, there may be one or two out there. And so I'm going to believe what they say. That's your obligation is actually to apply critical thinking, not just believe what somebody says, no matter how
Yeah.
right we are. The point
Yeah.
is to apply critical thinking
That is the point, is to apply the critical
and to
thinking.
look for evidence and different perspectives. So last week I talked a bit about perspectives and context. And if you're just existing within the context of what somebody else set for you, then you're not applying that critical thinking. If you're looking at the one angle that somebody pointed out to you, then you're not applying the critical thinking. To apply it, you have to look at different angles. And I don't mean that you have to go to Fox News and MSNBC, right? That's not the point because that's a fallacy. The idea that those are two points of view is not it's not.
Those are two political views, but they're not. If you need to do the actual critical thinking and the
So you
looking
you
and the
need to
under.
look
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
evidence that's coming through. Some people are providing very narrow views of what happened. Others are saying, well, here are 15 different camera angles that are all synchronized so that we can look together at what's happening. Those are very different situations. And so when you're looking at it from I am going to follow the rule of believing everything that my party says, then you're going to endorse the very narrow perspective. If you want to challenge that, if you want to apply critical thinking, then you're going to look at lots of different angles, regardless of the channel that it comes from. It doesn't matter what channel it comes from if there's an attempt to provide a broader picture. But the critical thinking that we have to do is to ask for that broader picture and not just blindly follow the rules of I am going to do what my party tells me to do or what my party says I should do. Next time, we're going to talk about some rules of logic because there are ways to think about arguments that are being made that allow us to assess whether or not the argument makes sense. And it doesn't matter the channel. Again, it can be from Fox News or MSNBC or New York Times or your neighbor or whoever. There are ways to actually look at the argument and assess whether or not that argument, logical argument, whether or not it should be whether or not you should be influenced by it. One of the things that's really interesting now is how those rules are actually being manipulated in the public sphere and how things are how arguments are actually breaking a lot of these logical rules, but still seem to make common sense. So we look at the common sense and we're ignoring the logic. So anyway, the point from today is really to think about those different arguments, right? Are
Yeah.
is it time to be the 6-year-old and challenge the rules? Is it
Challenge
time
the
or is it
rules.
time to be the
It's the
13-year-old and follow the rules? And next time we'll
yeah.
talk about whether it can be the 20-year-old and actually apply some real logic to to assess whether or not an argument is or is not a good argument. Sound good,
That
Joe?
sounds like it's gonna be a whole lot of fun. That sounds like it's gonna be a whole lot. I'm looking forward to that.
All right, so we'll talk about that next time on Masters of Influence. And if you are out there listening to this and have any examples of situations in which people are trying to control the discourse or trying to set the rules or trying to make sure that everybody talks the same way, then please share those and maybe we'll chat about them more next time on Masters of Influence.